What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Happness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Howard Gray, and we stretch the analogy of designing workshops like a mixtape and what there is we can learn from DJs about workshop design and facilitation until the very end. So you better stay tuned. And by the way, don't waste your time to take notes. Just visit workshops.work and download my free one-page summary. Now enjoy the show. Howard, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really pleased to have been invited to join you.
Yes, and I was waiting for this for a long time. Very excited to hear more about the analogy between mixtapes and workshop designs, as I spent, I think, quite some time in my youth in front of the recorder to produce mixtapes.
I'm looking forward to getting into it then, as we're both mixtape creators as well as workshop creators.
Exactly. Before we get there, I always like to start with the intro question. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator?
That's a good question. So I have a bit of an issue with labels. This probably comes from my general sort of issues with being conventional and like anti-authority challenges. So I don't like labeling myself that much. I think actually I think I first started calling myself a facilitator when someone else called me it. So it was when I started doing facilitation properly. I didn't even know what it was at this point. And then someone else started referring to me as, the facilitator of the session. And then I realized, I guess that's what I am. So I think that was about 5 years ago. Yeah, so it's sort of a label that others have created for me. And then I just thought, okay, so I guess that's what I do. I didn't really know what to call it when I first started doing this kind of work. So it was probably about a year into doing this kind of work more properly, I suppose, when someone just labeled me as that. And I thought, okay, I guess that's what it is then.
Nice. It's funny, I get this answer a lot. And I think the term of facilitator only shapes or has shaped itself for the last year, maybe or two.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also that the whole thing with like labels generally, whether it's facilitation or workshops or other stuff in the world of work, it can be challenging because the labels kind of come and go and it's hard to sort of pin yourself down to one thing. And also the word can mean different things to different people. So the word facilitation can mean very different things to different people in different contexts. And so, yeah, the labeling stuff can be tricky sometimes, particularly for those of us who are out sort of doing our own thing and growing our own business. I think trying to put a name on what you do can be hard. So, yeah, I don't label myself as it all the time, but yeah, it's something that someone else christened me as a few years ago.
So and now I cannot resist to ask the question. So if you had to put a hashtag or put your own label on your forehead, what would it be?
I walked into that one, didn't I?
Yes.
So I think it's more around story, and I'm really interested in stories and like the crafting of stories. I don't even know this is a word, but I think the idea of like story crafting is really fascinating. And I believe there are interesting stories in all kinds of things in the world, even things that seem boring or have been covered before. I think there's always different angles and different ways to come at things. And I think stories are incredibly powerful, and like crafting stories around topics that engage people, that's probably the driver of really all the work I do. So I think I'd probably use story crafting as my hashtag.
I like it. Story crafting. It's a nice edge. And you mentioned in our exploration call that you had a past as a DJ. And
yes.
So story crafting and DJing, I can see some relations. How does it all fit together, and what did you learn from your DJ career about workshop design or facilitation?
So I need to like make it clear that I definitely was not a pro DJ at all. I was like I was beyond bedroom, so I got paid to play gigs sometimes.
Don't play the imposter syndrome game.
Oh, I know. I know. I'm being far too like self-deprecating. So I never was like pro. I spent a lot of my time like actually on the kind of business side and like the ironically actually, and this maybe gets to the second part of the question, on the promotion and like production side and like creating the space for the DJs. But I did DJ a bit myself, and I started DJing when I was like 14, I think. I bought my first set of turntables. It took me ages to save up for, but that was like a moment. And then I acquired a lot of records from working in a record store. So I did DJ. I DJed like in a few different countries, a few different cities, in lots of different interesting places. And so I still love that the art form. So I definitely wasn't pro, but I'm very kind of connected to it, and spent nearly 10 years of my life working with DJs professionally, like as an agent. That was like a lot of the work that I did during my 20s and early 30s. I guess what have I learned from like either my own time doing DJing or working with them? Actually quite a lot. And I think it does apply into workshops and facilitators surprisingly, in a surprisingly interesting way. I think a couple of things to kind of get us going on this sort of workshops as mixtapes idea. I think firstly, a lot of people overdo it DJing wise. So that I learned that when you look to the big name DJs, they get to play headline slots and they can play whatever music they want. Their job is to get like to be the center of attention, to get the whole party like really going. I think a lot of people when they're starting overdo it and just look to the big names and try and kind of ape them and try and sort of be something they're not, and overcrank stuff. I think that's something that's really easy to do. And I think in facilitation workshops, it's very easy to sort of think, oh, I've got to be this person, this persona, and I've got to be the expert, and I've got to be like this big kind of extrovert thing. I think that's something that's really easy trap to fall into. I remember there's a book I read when I was maybe 18 or 19 called How to DJ Properly. And it's a really great book. It's a little dated now because obviously things have changed a bit, but the principles are still really strong. And two things that jumped out for me in that book. One was the idea of the warm-up slot. So the idea of being able to play a good warm-up at the beginning of the night is a real skill. And a lot of people can't do it, or they're just not willing to do it because you're playing music that is not the peak time stuff. So that thing's one thing. And the second thing is being able to play the whole night. So a lot of DJs will come and play their 1 hour or their 2 hour set. But being able to play the whole night is a very different skill set. Some DJs are really good at playing from the very beginning to the very end. And in both those cases, I think it's all about headroom. Mm-hmm. So you can't play too fast. You can't play too intense. You can't play too... It's not just about the speed of the music. It's about vocals and bass and like bringing it all together and pacing yourself. And you don't want to play all of the headliners' music either. If you're playing the warm-up, you've got to allow them space for them to do the thing. I think where this relates to the workshops is you don't want to play all the headliners' music. Maybe the headliners are actually the group. You don't want to be taking their stuff away and making it your own. It's actually the opposite, where you're giving it to them or the audience specifically. And so I think with the DJ side and the facilitation side, being able to like play a warm-up and be able to allow space for somebody else to come in, whether it's the audience or someone else who's part of the session, and being able to do the whole thing if you need to be able to. So being able to go and be able to do a 3-day workshop or a 4-hour DJ set, they're actually quite similar kind of pursuits. And I think that the people who are best are able to move between the two kind of modes. So there's a few, those are two of the things I learned from that book.
I love it. And I can think of so many more now. So what I heard about your first example of trying to be someone, it sounds to me like authenticity. So this entire mindset of a facilitator or a DJ. And then I wonder to what extent the DJ would also adjust to the room. Because if a DJ realized that the set that he or she had planned actually doesn't stick to the group and nobody gets off their chairs and nobody dances, they also have to adjust, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And this gets into a whole thing around like pre-planning a set. So, if a DJ is booked to play for a couple of hours or something, some will often pre-plan their set. And like that can be okay sometimes if you know the parameters and and you've maybe played there a bunch of times before and it's really clear what it's for. Mm-hmm. But quite often whether we're in a workshop or a nightclub or a festival, we don't know. Like if, when I would send, as an agent, I would send my clients like all kinds of weird and wonderful places they'd never played before, like all kinds of, I think I did shows in like 60 something countries. And sometimes they'd show up and be like, you don't know what you're going to get. And so you can't turn up with a pre-planned set. You need to be able to adapt. And that means you can't just go from a script. You need to be able to adjust quickly and like maybe change genre completely. Maybe not even the songs. You're almost changing the entire theme because you realize, okay, this audience, they don't like this stuff, or they're not interested in this kind of genre of music, or I got booked to play after this person who's playing something completely different, because you don't know what you're going to get. And so it's a very similar thing, the idea of being able to adapt to different audiences, to different locations, different technical setups as well. It's definitely something that's a thing as well. When the tech doesn't work, what do we do? Like, I've been shortened by half an hour. I've got to figure out what to do. So being able to adapt, and I think this gets to like having an understanding of audience, but also of content and timing. All these things are very, very similar things. And so I think it really comes down to being adaptable and responsive.
And multitasking.
Multitasking as well. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think that absolutely that being able to multitask, being able to be quite agile and nimble are two skill sets that are very applicable to both disciplines for sure.
And I always like to ask the question, what would make a workshop fail? And I wonder whether the same issues that would bring a workshop to fail that would bring a DJ set to fail. Or a DJ party. How do you call that? A DJ party? No.
Depends what you like. People have different terminology for it. I mean, it could be people call it parties. Like or a club night or a festival or whatever it be, a gig. But they're quite similar. They're quite similar. It's people coming together around something, around a topic or a theme that they're interested in, and there is this person or people who are guiding the experience. Whether that's through content and other stuff. And so I think to your question about what would make a workshop fail, the first thing that comes to mind for me is when you forget that it's not about you. So if you make it all about yourself, you might be okay. But then you're getting into like a keynote speaker kind of thing. And even then it's not about you, because it's all about the value or the inspiration or the sparks that you provide to the audience. So particularly with workshops are especially about them, not you. So I think the thing that makes workshops fail, as well as tech problems and other things, and timing issues and all kinds of stuff, I think it's the forgetting that it's not about you. And so you need to be there to serve and guide the audience. And I think the same thing for DJing is often the case. Like if I think it's all about me and I'm just thinking about showing off like the depth of my musical knowledge or something, I might just play something people don't want to hear, they're not interested in, or it's not coherent or cohesive, or I've missed the mark with the kind of atmosphere in the place or the city or the culture. Culture is a massive part of this, especially if we're facilitating stuff in different places and with different groups, and now we're online. The wonderful thing about that is people from different countries, different cultures can all come together in one place, which is fantastic. And obviously with in person, it's more difficult, but we need to be more cognizant of that, because there are more differences. So thinking about that stuff and like forgetting it's not about you, I think that's the thing that makes both fail the most.
So what is your strategy to prepare for this diversity that you will face?
In a workshop context, well, probably in both actually. I think it's a combination of depth and breadth. So I remember back when I just played vinyl, and like most all DJs did at one point, you'd be carrying this huge box or bag. It was so heavy, you couldn't take much with you. You've only got maybe 80 records, so you've got to be really careful what you pick, because you need that for depth and breadth. Now, obviously, we have access to technologies that enable us to have, in theory, the world of music at one click. And the same thing kind of goes for workshops. We've got these amazing tools where we can utilize content and ideas, conversations. This is the podcast where I can listen to other episodes and think, oh, that's a great idea. What a great idea. I can bring that all together really, really easily. So I think the depth and breadth in preparation, having both. So you need to have the breadth where you can go where you want to go, but you also need the depth where, okay, this is really working. And maybe people are going to ask questions in a workshop setting. People are going to ask questions about, we really want to spend time there. And you don't know where that's going to be necessarily. Sometimes it might be the bit you didn't think would be important, or we just touch on this. Suddenly the group say, oh, we really want to talk about that. And suddenly this whole conversation happens. And then you need the depth where you can go into it in more detail if you need to or want to. So I think preparing with both, and it's obviously tension because you can't have all of both. It's difficult. There's going to be a limit of what you can carry around with you, so to speak. I think trying to find that balance when you're preparing between sensing, I think it comes down to sensing where you think you might need the depth. So having the breadth, but then sensing, okay, I think this point we might end up going into a deeper conversation. Or at this point in a DJ set, that's a moment where the crowd are going to want this style or this kind of sound. And so I think that's where you've got that preparation for depth if you need it.
Yeah, makes total sense. And then would you then do some research about the groups you're facing?
Yeah, so this is something I think about quite a bit with workshops. And it can be difficult because you don't want to demand too much from an audience up front. It depends on the type of, it depends on the setting, right? So if you're working with a company or a corporation, like there'll be certain data protection stuff, for example. There'll be things they either don't want to or can't kind of reveal. There'll be things, are they going to want to get all their staff to fill out a 25-minute long survey about stuff? Maybe not. So there's obviously limitations and constraints. I try and learn as much as I can. I think it kind of gets to the idea of enrollment versus mandated. So when people are mandated to do a thing, they're forced to, this is a training session you have to do. There's a different challenge because you've maybe got some people who are uncertain, skeptical, don't have time, etc. Whereas if somebody's enrolled and has put their hand and said, I really want to come to this.
Yeah.
It's easier to get an understanding of them in advance or in the session because they're going to be more willing to share. The same thing happens with like music stuff. You might be, oh, this is my favorite band or DJ and I'm enrolled, I want to go. Whereas if you're mandated, which is where your friend has dragged you along and you don't really want to be there, to enjoy that, it's going to take a bit more time to turn you around. So I try and get an understanding of an audience through usually like kind of really simple, light surveys in advance if I'm running a workshop session. When people are mandated, it is difficult. So I will try and at least speak to the client and usually it's a more kind of broader sense of the group and challenges in the company and like again, it goes back to culture, like what is going on thematically right now in the business, like how's morale, how are people feeling, is it a big acquisition recently, whatever it is. So trying to get some sort of insight. I prefer the qualitative insight than the quantitative. The numbers help, but I find, again, going back to stories, I think if you can get even a couple of sentences from someone or a little something verbal, that helps a lot. So yeah, it's tricky with understanding audiences in advance because sometimes you do just get plonked in there and off you go, and you have to be very responsive and figure out quickly what's going on. But where I can, I'll try and get an understanding in advance.
Yeah. And I'm curious, what do you think is more important, the facilitation part or the design part? And maybe the same is also applicable for DJing.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's hard to say objectively. I can say from my perspective.
Yes, please. That's what I'm interested in.
Like for myself, I've realized that I'm good at holding space, and my work, my training as a coach and like certification as a coach has definitely helped with that. I've got a lot better at that in the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm good at holding space, but I also recognize that, and this gets back to maybe the story part again, the design and performative elements of it. So it's kind of both, like in a way, give me more of a kick, and they really like they drive me and motivate me more. And I know this goes slightly against the "it's not about you" idea, so I'm a bit of a hypocrite. I
wouldn't say that.
Yeah, I think it's a balance. So performative, you have to be, if you're performing, as long as it's still for the group first, that's great. It's when it becomes self-indulgent that's where the line is. And I actually was thinking about this yesterday. There's been a couple of things I've done that are maybe more like talks and workshops, but I think I became a little self-indulgent. And so I think for me, that's a line. But to the question of like what's more important, the design or facilitation, I think what I've learned, and I never ever have seen myself as a designer, particularly like a capital D designer, because designers are to preserve people who can use Photoshop and are architects and they're like this sort of magical beings. But actually design is everywhere, right? There's in everything from like food to the technologies we're using right now to the city road systems, to, all kinds of stuff. And so I think actually design is everywhere. And actually in the facilitation, you get back to what you were saying about responsiveness, you're still doing design. So you're still you're sort of laying out the track as you go. You're still doing design and like redesigning stuff. Like when something doesn't work or, we've hit upon a magic moment, you might do a slight adjustment or a little bit of extra design. I often like fiddle with slides during breaks and I'll like be moving stuff around, like let's change that, let's redesign this. So I think the design is more important because without the design skills or the design mindset, the facilitation becomes quite rigid and it's easy to fall into the trap of it becoming either about you or it's just too straight and not flexible enough. So I think it comes down to design. Sorry, that was a long way of putting it, but I think the design runs into the facilitation. So I think I've realized that the design bit is everywhere.
Yeah. Before I dig deeper into that, just one thought. Because I don't agree that if you design a workshop so that you enjoy it, that you make it all about yourself. Because I think that the energy that the facilitator brings into a room transmits to the group. So if you're not enjoying it, if you're bored, then the group will be bored. So in order to be in service of the group, you need to enjoy what you're doing and you need to trust that what you're about to present them, throw at them, is actually fun and valuable.
I think you're 100% right. Thank you for calling me out on that. So I do still think there is a line when it becomes more about you delivering content. And I think there's different like flavors of facilitation. Sometimes we have like more kind of educational stuff where it's more like content driven, and other times it will be very kind of like space focused for group discussion. I think for me, and maybe this is like an issue that I'm still trying to overcome, is that line of where it's too much about performative content stuff. But I do think you're 100% right when it comes to energy and enthusiasm. That's well over half the battle. If you show up like interested and wanting to be there, then people mirror that. Humans were quite simple creatures in some ways. That alone can do wonders, even with a tough group sometimes. If you look and feel like, hey, she really wants to be here, like this person who's leading this session, automatically everybody's going to feel a little bit up. So I think you're right. And I think that generally speaking, you need to go quite far on the spectrum before you're hitting the kind of it's too much about you, because energy and enthusiasm can carry you a long way.
And I think what you said about the curiosity, that you're there to really also learn and guide the group, because if you make it too much about yourself, and I think there's maybe the line, then you're taking too much space. If you just enjoy listening to yourself too much, then you make it about yourself. But if you're just enthusiastic to let the group speak and explore, I think this is then a good place to be.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think, and like one sort of, this is a slightly more tactical thing, but like one little sort of trick or whatever tool that I use around this is like, it's just not very hard timings, but just being mindful that, okay, is there a certain amount? Well, when was the last time everyone else has done something?
Yeah.
Because if we have more than 50 between anything from like, if it's online like 9 minutes up to like in person maybe like 20 or something.
Yeah.
If it's too long in one format, especially when it's about me, then it's time to change. And so I make sure in part of the design phase that, okay, we need to take it over to you, over to the group. It's your time to do something with this rather than it being about me. So that almost self-manages me, where I don't fall into the trap of it being too performative.
Yeah. And I would immediately jump on that train and bring it back to the DJing. Otherwise, it's too easy. I love this analogy. It's all going to be about the analogy. What makes a good mixtape, and how can you translate that to a good workshop design?
That's a great switch. So I suppose, again, something I've been thinking about a lot recently, actually. It's like sort of language and vernacular. So mixtape can mean different things to different people. You know, you might have, back in the olden days where it was cassettes, and actually I think the first music system I bought when I was like 12 was, I think it'd be about €100 or something, which took me ages to save up for my newspaper delivery round. With like I think it had a CD player, but it had two cassette tape things and a radio, so I could record off the radio, and I sort of hacked bits of it together. So
Ghetto Blaster, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
pretty much. Ghetto Blaster.
This is like a carrier around. It was massive, but yeah, exactly. So mixtape's been around for ages, really, and so it's depending on your age or what you're interested in, what comes to mind. You might think of mixtapes in different ways, but really, I suppose at their crux, it's about creating something. Can maybe be for yourself, but typically for somebody or others to share with them, and hopefully for them to enjoy. And usually it's going to be borrowing, utilizing different songs, different resources, and bringing them together in new ways. And it can just be one song, the next song, if you're just straight recording it. If you're actually making kind of a mix, as it were, then you might have like kind of blends of some sort where you're blending from one thing to the other. It could be very, very simple. It could be very, very complex and woven together in this amazing way. There's actually this DJ called Laurent Garnier, who is French. He's like a legendary kind of electronic music DJ. And I was reading an interview where he is referenced this week. And this guy who was talking about him said, like most DJs will try and make their mixtape seamless. So you almost move from one song to the other and you barely even realize it. For Laurent Garnier, the mix part, that's actually the thing, even more than the song. So like he will almost like deliberately contrast different styles. So the mix of like a soft vocal with this suddenly like big beat coming in, that's the moment. It's almost like the movement between the two parts is the moment. So that can be like, for a workshop, that can be the contrast between two different topics. Oh, we covered this, but here's the other side of it. And that kind of strange thing coming together, that can be the moment rather than the topic itself. So I think that it's really about a mindset of utilizing different ideas, different resources, different bits of content, whatever it is, and putting it together with your own unique spin. And your own unique spin might just be literally, here's one song that doesn't usually follow that one. That's it. Or it could be something as, this is the song that I know we took that walk down the street together when you got that new job and we were celebrating. Like it could be like a real memorable moment. Or it could be, this is a song that like changed my life. Or this is the newest thing that I've just found this week that I really wanted to share with you because I think it's great. And sharing it with other people. And so I think this idea of taking ideas, content, thinking, mindsets, models, tools, whatever it is, really thinking about it like a mixtape would be, it could be 5 songs, it could be 50 songs, and it could go on, it could be in lots of different compilations and volumes and everything else, and compiling it in an interesting way, maybe mixing it using some technical wizardry if you want to, but also just stitching it straight off your 2 cassette players, and it sounds a bit, there's all the crackles and all the stop-start bits. That's still fine too. So I think there's something really powerful in thinking like this when it comes to workshops. You can be a technical wizard and it can be super smooth and seamless. You can contrast things together, or you can just stitch it together and make it work and just share it with a couple of other people who you think, hey, I made this, I'd love to share this with you. So I think there's something really powerful in this for any of us that are doing this kind of work.
Yeah, and I like the different ways of it to just putting contrast in between the songs.
Hi, this is Andrew. I'm a facilitator and head of customer success at Session Lab, the dynamic workshop planner tool. More than 30,000 facilitators, trainers, and coaches use our workshop planner tool and save time and effort in the design process. So, how do they do it? Our drag and drop agenda builder makes it easy to transform your ideas into high-quality workshops, and the timing of your agenda automatically updates when you make changes. You can collaborate in real time with your colleagues and easily share professional-looking printouts with your clients. And if you need inspiration, you can check out our library of more than 500 activities and exercises and simply drag the ones you need right into your workshop agenda. So check out Session Lab to save time and effort in your workshop design process. And now get your first 2 months of Session Lab Pro absolutely free at sessionlab.com/workshopswork.
Would you design, or did the shift from offline meetings in the physical space to the online space, did you adjust the way you design the sequence with more contrast, less contrast?
Yeah, I've done bits. So I've done bits of online stuff before the pandemic, as we're talking in September, before the last six months. Not tons, actually, surprisingly, given that I'm a kind of bit of a geek and I've been into like internet and computer stuff since I was a kid. So it's kind of weird in a way. But I did change a few things. I realized, and going back to that idea about changing the format quite regularly. So I don't want to be talking for too long, nor do I want to be doing Q&A for too long, nor do we want to be doing activities for too long at a stretch. I realized that in person, we can probably go for 20, 30 minutes, give or take. That's my sort of rule of thumb. My even rougher rule of thumb for online is to cut that in half.
Okay.
Because of attention and because of body language and because of just that connected feel that's harder to replicate online. I found that something that would be a 25-minute bit or part of the mixtape, as it were, that would come down to more like 10 or 12 minutes. And I found that changing stuff every roughly 10 minutes feels for me about right. I tend to speaking of like DJing and the way I would run a workshop or DJ would be quite quick. Like I play lots of songs and like mix between things quite quickly. I have lots of slides. Other people are very different. But I find for me, 10 minutes or so switches would help. And I actually added more, it sounds slightly counterintuitive, slightly more space at the beginning, wherever I can, for people just to settle down and just to sort of be present. And that's important in person too, but I think as we're context switching between online meetings and staring at a screen, I found just that extra couple of minutes for a check-in, and that might be like as a group, but often one-to-one. So I pair people off. So let's go to pairs. Just talk for 2 or 3 minutes about how you doing? How you doing today? Like, what are you looking forward to this week? Just whatever. Maybe it's like, I guess it's kind of an icebreaker thing, but just even with people that know each other already, just to kind of settle yourself down and get the stuff out, the cruft and the bits out of your brain that are still, the remnants that are still there. So those are two of the things, cutting down the format time by about half and allowing a bit more space at the beginning for people just to kind of settle into where we are. I found those two things help me a lot.
Yeah. And I think it makes total sense because in the physical space, just by entering a new space, puts you into the mindset of the workshop or session or whatsoever. But if you're just switching the Zoom rooms, you're still sitting in wherever you are sitting.
Yes.
So how can we expect someone to make the mental shift just by putting a different URL in the browser?
It's actually, I love that you said that. I haven't thought about it like that before. It's so obvious, but yes, you're absolutely right. And I don't have enough of an understanding of neurology or psychology for this, but yeah, that context switch isn't sufficient. It's just a different URL, like here's someone else on the screen. Whereas, like you said, in person, we're going to a place. There's going to be some coffee or some snacks. There's someone to meet. There's a poster on the wall, whatever. There's this other stuff going on. And so having that, and it's a bit of a hack, I suppose, but just something to help shift the mode a bit and make you feel like you are somewhere. I think that, and we can do that in lots of different ways, of course, lots of different ways. And it's the same with the DJ set. The first song, the first track that the DJ plays, often like, here we're shifting the tone. She's finished her set, I'm starting mine. And now here, we're going to go here next. And I think like the first song bit, that online, I think that's really important for us as facilitators and designers to find is like, what's that first song? And it might just be an ambient thing just to bring us, oh, this is, I don't know, or some strange conversation or some sort of film soundtrack thing, whatever it is. I think that to at least try and move people from the place they were before to the place they are now, I think that's really valuable, because you're totally right. There's not that physical shift. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that you emphasize that this is to be designed because we're setting a tone. So we might start with a different landing when we're about to enter a high pace ideation session, or when we're talking about very critical, difficult topics.
Yeah.
Then
absolutely.
we might want to start maybe with a minute of silence and meditation. Otherwise, maybe with a little bit of dancing and music.
Absolutely. And like you said, online, it's probably not fair of us. And this actually gets back to making assumptions, making it about ourselves and not thinking about our audience enough. As if we take that moment to think about, okay, so where are our audience coming from before this? Are they coming from running around like, doing some schooling stuff for their kids, or making lunch in 10 minutes, or a meeting with their boss, or whatever it is, and we're expecting them to show up for this thing? Yeah. We need to find that start point to get them into this is the environment we're going to be in for the next little while. So I think you've hit upon something that's so important. It feels tiny and it's really easy to miss, but I think that first few minutes can actually really make or break it. Like the end results will differ drastically if you don't get that first little bit right.
And this leads me directly to another question that I always ask. And maybe you can think of something else than a check-in question. What would be your favorite exercise? Or do you have something that is your silver bullet?
I don't know if I've got a silver bullet. So again, it varies on, I think back to my music stuff, and there would be certain tracks where it's like, okay, if in trouble, play this. Mm-hmm. And those would change, over the months and years and stuff like that, because you always have new stuff, and it would be different silver bullets for different audiences, because, you need to drop a certain thing for a different mood or whatever. But there would be certain go-to things like, okay, I'm struggling, people are leaving, I got to find something. So I think the same thing goes. I think that's kind of the question you're getting to in a way. It's like, what's the thing? Or it's like, okay, it's great. So my favorite one, I think, and not to mix my metaphors too much, but I do also think of like workshop design as a bit like movie production, because you're so focused on like both detail and creativity and timing and budget and magic all at the same time. So I love movies. I always wanted to, work in that space. And actually, I think with workshops, you kind of do in a way. You're still designing this kind of experiential thing. But the exercise that I love the most is one that I call movie storyboarding. And very briefly, just to sort of walk through it. I think what's great about this is it can be as simple or as complex as you want, just like mixtapes. It can be as kind of DIY or as hi-fi as you want it to be. So the movie storyboarding thing is very simply like telling the story of something. And so it could be, and I've used this as an accelerator program that I'm a big part of in New York for media and entertainment founders in the city. It's a great program called NYC. And we did this in the first module with them. They're all founders. So we asked them to create the movie story of their company. And this could be as simple as a few post-it notes. It could be one page with some kind of like storyboard, like, just like 6 kind of drawings drawn out, or it could be make a whole video and a treatment and like a full pitch to the studio, whatever you want it to be. So it's great. You can make it as hi-fi as lo-fi as you want. And it's very simply tell the story of the company as if it were a movie. And what I love about this is it's very open to interpretation. You can use any influences you like. So it could be, who's the hero of this story? Is it you? Is it your customer? Is it someone who's the villain? Is it the person that fired you when you had a job and now you're on your own company? Is the villain that big company that you want to go up against? Is it a problem in the world? What era is it set in? Is it going to be in the future? Is it today? Is it kind of in the Wild West? I don't know. Is it who is the director and producer? Are there special effects in this movie? Is it a drama? Is it a comedy? Is it a space age thing? And so we found that doing this, once people did a draft of it, if you then get feedback from either from a facilitator or a group, you would find that suddenly they would be able to, like, the second draft of it, just like any kind of story, I guess, suddenly really like turned into this thing where it's like, wow, I can feel this thing where the company are fighting against this army of evil villains and we need to like win because we're going to save the world through this, whatever it was. And we got an amazing diverse mix. So some people had these kind of Great Gatsby inspired like 1930s kind of story. Some people had the kind of disaster movie. Some people, it was a kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger like action in the jungle thing. And it's a really fun exercise to do it's very inclusive because everybody's seen movies at some point. And we've all got some sort of cultural reference. And you can make it as hi-fi as you want. You can make it as lo-fi as you want. You can bring in any influences you want, but it still relates to your thing. And in this case, it was for a company. It could be for a project. It could be for you, yourself, your own style. If you were in the movie of you, who would play you? It's a nice question. So you can have a lot of fun with it and take it into like a work project. It could be a very small work project. It could be your own business. It could be yourself. Lots of different opportunities. I really love that exercise because there's so much you can do with it.
Then you can even think of the soundtrack to the movie.
Yes, thank you.
And then we're back to the mixtape.
Yes, of course. What would be the mixtape?
It was sneaky from my side.
I can't believe I didn't say that. Thank you for mentioning that. So yeah, you can go absolutely wild with that. So we did it as a fairly DIY, like kind of lightweight exercise, but actually you could build like an entire workshop on that. That could be and this is another thing I love about this kind of work is something can be a very, very small exercise, or it can actually blow up into something much, much bigger and become its own session. So I think, so that's definitely my favorite one to use.
Thank you for sharing. I was wondering, how would the world of facilitation look like if more facilitators would master the craft of DJing?
That's a great question. What would the world of facilitation look like if more facilitators mastered the art of DJing? So I think there's a couple of things. One that we kind of touched on a little bit before was being able to switch content or mode. Let's call it modes, because it doesn't necessarily need to be content. A lot of my sessions tend to be I'm quite content driven just as a person, just like my sort of style, but doesn't need to be content. So any mode you can switch quickly whenever you need to.
What do you understand by mode?
Well, so it could be energy, it could be activity, it could even be topic, it could be the groups that we're working in teams and we're going to switch teams now. It's just being able to adjust either really sharp, deliberately, if you want to make it have an impact, or very smoothly, we're going to start gradually moving people around the room and you're going to start meeting some, whatever it is, like you can do it. It's like the kind of long mix or the bash quick thing. So I think being able to switch any mode, so it could be the content, could be the topic, could be the question that was being asked. If someone asked a difficult question, how do you switch modes? And being able to kind of go along with that and switch things whenever you need to. And then kind of almost the opposite of that, or related, but the other side of the coin, maybe the other side of that coin is this idea of like reading a room. And I think with DJing, like if going back to the how to DJ properly, the warm-up DJ particularly, I think, has to be able to read the room. Because again, it gets the start bit. So if you're at the beginning of the night and you're playing the first hour, if you make a bad job of that, it's not going to go well. The rest of the thing's not going to go well. And reading the room is so important. If you start in a workshop with you get off on the wrong foot, or the intro's bad, or you misjudge it, reading the room is crucial. And I think if you master the art of DJing, you are able to play and perform in any kind of context. And you'll probably still get nervous from time to time. There'll be technical issues. I don't know about in a workshop whether you'll get drunk people coming up to you in the booth or not. That doesn't usually happen in workshops. It's more of a DJ thing. But there'll be challenges. There'll be random people kind of coming up and doing stuff. So I think being able to read the room, particularly in the midst of things that might be going wrong or challenges, I think if you master the art of DJing, you will get better at reading a room because people will be disappearing, leaving, coming back, checking out, perhaps, checking in, technical problems, all kinds of stuff. If you're better at reading the room and being okay as well with that. Some people might just be going to the bar for a drink. They might just be going to the coffee or going to go to the bathroom, or they have to take an urgent call and they're going to come back. Getting okay with the movement and the things that happen. And some people on Zoom, for example, they might get distracted. Their kids might be crying in the room next door. So I think being okay and focusing on the craft and the work, which is creating the experience and not getting flustered. I think that's something I learned from doing DJ work, was like being okay with things not working, reading the room, and then also this idea of like being able to switch and change modes whenever you need to. Yeah. So I think those are two things. If you master the art of DJing, those are two of the things that apply into your workshops.
So dear facilitators, sign up for the next DJ course.
I'm not the person to teach you how to DJ, but there are some good people out there who can.
Yeah, we won't let you leave the facilitation world again. No worries. When you say reading the room, do you think it's something that is in intuition, or is it something that we can actually learn to do?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's probably a bit of both. I would imagine that some people are probably just naturally a little more attuned to reading. When you say reading the room, what does that mean? It's probably going to be majority body language, probably. It's probably non-verbal cues. And again, I'm not an expert on psychology, but I would imagine that some people are probably more attuned to reading non-verbal cues than others. Having said that, I do definitely think you can learn. So you can definitely improve. And I think a lot of it's pattern recognition. There's, not to make it too general, but you can sense there's certain types. You don't want to stereotype too hard, but there are some people who will show up for a workshop and you go, okay, I've seen this behavior before. I've noticed this one before. And there's the person who wants to sort of take control. There's the person who's half checking out but could have some magic to share, and you kind of get a sense that I think they might want to share if we can just help coax it out of them, and they could have some really great stuff to share. So I think it's actually partly it may be nature rather than nurture and intuition, but I think it can be learned probably through patterns. And again, patterns gets down to reps and experience. Same as doing any kind of work, same as doing DJ work. You just by doing the stuff and being out there, you will start to notice those rhythms and patterns that keep showing up. So I think it's a bit of both, but I definitely think it can partially be learned through just observing patterns, for sure.
Yeah. And maybe also, I think of a party scenario and the impact of a DJ, and then also the group dynamics in a workshop. If you can get this first person to really get engaged and enthusiastic, then this can change the entire group dynamics as well.
Yes.
And sometimes, and I guess as a DJ, you kind of get these people, okay, maybe they're moving their bodies a little bit more and they're surrounded by a larger crowd, and you can see, okay, if I get this one, then the party is going to rock.
You're totally right. I love this. It's the same. Yes, it is. Right? And it's so yeah. So I'll sort of on the flip side, my workshop side, it's like, okay, if we can get that group or that first person or that table or whatever it is to share, then suddenly it all happens. And I'm sure you've had this where you see this sort of wall of silence. And for the facilitator, I'm sure it's probably come up in previous podcasts, I'm sure, embracing the wall of silence, because you've got to have faith in that once one person goes, the whole lot will start to go.
Yeah.
But that bit, and it could be in a workshop, it could be 10 seconds. That 10 seconds can feel like forever. It could be horrible. And it's the same with DJing, because especially if you're playing like a warm-up and the dance floor's empty, like it can feel like I have actually played to empty dance floors for like over an hour before, like playing a warm-up, because the place is just filling up well over an hour. And you've got to have faith, and someone will make some movement and they'll like move a bit and then they'll disappear again. But you've got to have faith. So you might get one in a workshop, you get one person sharing and it's magic, and then you get nothing else for another, no one else says anything. And so it's that keeping it going and trying to kind of guide it. And I think it's really having faith in yourself. Yeah. That it's very, very similar, because you need the engagement, you want there to be that engagement. And sometimes it just doesn't come that quickly. And having the patience and the kind of, it is the faith in the group and the faith in yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're very similar. You're giving me flashbacks of me playing for 2 hours to like nobody and just hoping that it'll work. But yeah, that again, it all comes with reps and practice and I think it's belief not just in yourself, but belief in the room.
Yeah. And the courage to just sit with the silence. Yeah, I think it's one big trap for the facilitator, as soon as not to allow too much silence. And then if we start talking, we talk it to death, and then it's over. The energy is gone.
Yeah. Same with the DJ. You get one person dancing and then you turn and then you're like, right, I'm going to go and play the peak time stuff straight away. and it could be, it's too much. And it just, people are like, no. Where same thing, if someone shares and you just start talking and you just keep going, then everyone will retract. And it is being okay with the pacing. And that does take time. Like especially when you're starting out, that can feel really uncomfortable. I still get discomfort from the silence, the facilitator silence. I still feel the discomfort. I try to embrace it, but it's not something that comes easy. I think it just comes over time.
Yeah, I get that. Since we are approaching the hour, and I know that you have a call upcoming, if someone, for a reason that I definitely don't understand, but if someone in the audience fell asleep after minute 2, just woke up and doesn't have time to listen to our conversation again, what would you like them to take away?
Just the thoughts of actually falling directly asleep after minute 2. What I'm taking away? I think that don't need to think like a DJ. Just thinking like someone who makes mixtapes. And that could be any of us. We've probably all made changing radio channels where we're changing between things. So I think the idea of like curating your workshop like you would create another art form that you love, whether it is you're into interior design or art or music specifically, I think particularly music, but like thinking like a curator where you're just bringing things together and sharing it with people because like, hey, I think you would love this. I think that can really bring some magic to what you're doing. And I think also the idea of pacing and thinking like the warm-up DJ. So if you're thinking, okay, the place is empty, but I can build it in an interesting way and I can take my time and it's okay if certain things don't work. I think that idea of like pacing and being able to move between different contexts and having that depth and breadth together, I think those two things, so this idea of like curating, but also having the depth and the breadth together and taking your time, I think those are quite empowering for people who are doing this kind of work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that and for playing the analogy game with me until the end.
I love it.
I love it.
I love the analogy game. So we're in good. We're
wonderful. And I will put all your details in the show notes if someone from the audience wants to reach out. And I hope to get some more DJing, mixtaping, or video making experience at the Never Done Before festival with you.
Yes, indeed. I'm very much looking forward to that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Howard.
Thanks, Miriam.
Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.